Hello and welcome to this very important session. Really looking forward to diving in here. My name is Greg Tomczyk, CEO here at Valor Cybersecurity, based in Norfolk, Virginia, biggest military base in the world. Very honored to live here and be a part of this incredible community. This training is something that's been requested. Question that we get each and every day as we go out and serve defense contractors is, what should I avoid? Sometimes we have to understand what we shouldn't do to understand what we should do, and that's what we're going to go through today. Whether you're a defense contractor, somebody that serves defense contractors, IT MSPs, external service providers, or you're somebody who wants to serve the US government but doesn't know how to get there, this topic is one that we see companies either fall to the wayside because of or become elevated because they do it the right way. And we're all about action. We're going to break down the exact actions you need to take now and going forward to make sure this is something that you address in the right way and don't spend extra time, money, resources on these objectives. This is one of the biggest and most important cybersecurity efforts ever in the United States. It's crazy to say that, but cybersecurity obviously has been in the government for a long time, but there has not been a set standard of protecting information and systems when it comes to doing business with the US government. There has been FedRAMP and some other types of requirements, but CMMC is the most all-encompassing and, in my opinion, the most important cybersecurity effort in US history. I'm extremely excited about it. I know there's a lot of confusion when it comes to this topic, but as I mentioned, it all comes down to action, and that's what we're going to focus on here today. One of the things I'd like for each and every one of you to do is, before we get started, we have a pre-session questionnaire. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to get your thoughts. It's a few questions straight to the point on what are you struggling with? Do you really understand CMMC? And that allows you to better serve you with information, with tips, tricks, implementation mistakes. We try to be as targeted as possible with our information. I built Valor Cybersecurity to put all of the information you need to do it yourself. And if you need a company like us to come in and help you because outside your expertise, we know the value that we serve. We've been in this business for more than 8 years, and we know what defense contractors struggle with because I was once a defense contractor and I helped multiple people in that company and the ecosystem navigate the different obstacles that we're going to talk about here shortly. So go ahead and fill out that pre-session questionnaire. We're going to send you, as a part of filling that out, a free bonus, which is really our formula for implementing CMMC. It's the formula we use with each and every client that we've served. And we want to give it to you for free just by giving us the information on what you're struggling with, where you're at now, how confident you are, things of that nature. We'd be really honored if you take a short minute to fill that out and get a free bonus. This is a bonus of taking all the knowledge we have and putting it into a structure that makes sense to anybody. That's the translation aspect of what we do each and every day. So who am I and why am I here? I won't get too much into my background, but the military runs deep in my veins. Many generations of military officers have been in my family, and I've lived on military bases basically my entire life. I've been a defense contractor. So if you're leading a defense contractor, I have been in your shoes, maybe not in the specific competency that you're serving the US government, but I know what it takes to get from receiving an RFI to delivering a project for the government and all the requirements it takes in order to get there. And this is a big one that contract officers and prime contractors are asking in the ecosystem. And we have a lot of paranoia. A lot of the defense contractors that we serve and have served have a great deal of stress when it comes to cybersecurity and CMMC, DFARS, compliance. And this is what we feel is one of the biggest problem areas, one of the biggest challenges that the US faces in today's environment. And that's why we're spearheading it and really focus 100% of our efforts each and every day to help companies navigate these murky waters. I've also been a cyber attack victim, so I know what it takes to work through a cyber attack. I know what it takes to prevent cyber attacks from taking place because I was once that business owner that said, it's not going to be me, and I'll never be a part of a cyber attack. After my cyber attack, I went and helped more than 500 companies work through incidents. So I saw what was happening to cause them to have those data breaches, to leak that sensitive information, and then the repercussions of that taking place. That was a huge breakthrough for me, and I decided I wanted to be on the other side of that to help companies avoid it, be more proactive, and that really empowered me to get into the cybersecurity business. Since then, I've helped more than 100 defense contractors get ready for these current requirements. In 2017, this all came out, and they said, here's the framework we're going to use. We want you to start getting ready and self-assess yourself. Obviously, most companies in the defense industrial base did not get started at that point, but we started helping companies that knew they had to start, or they had an incident, and the Navy would come in, the Army would come in and do an investigation, and they needed to start implementing it because of something bad that happened. So that's why I'm here. I want to be a resource to you, and that's why I'm putting on this live training. So what are we going to go through today? We're going to break down a little bit of the requirements in a translated fashion, some of those common implementation mistakes that cost organizations like yours an immense amount of time and money. I'm not talking a couple thousand, I'm talking 50, 100,000, 200,000. I see so many companies come to us after the fact that have spent an enormous amount of money on this and still haven't made the strides that they really need to make. And it all comes down to taking targeted, prioritized, and budgeted action. And we're going to talk about those actionable steps you can take. What does your action plan look like? Obviously, there's different shapes and sizes of organizations. So we're going to talk about what your action plan could look like. And then we're going to have about 3 to 5 minutes to do a Q&A, but I want everybody that may have a question, if you're on YouTube, if you're on LinkedIn, put the question in the comments. That's going to allow us to be pointed in how we wrap this session up, to be able to answer those questions in an orderly fashion. We're not going to bring people on stage to ask those questions. We're going to go through the chat. We'll pick a couple key themes out and we'll answer those here towards the end of the session. So I always like to start these sessions with what is cybersecurity. People are coming at this topic with different knowledge when it comes to cybersecurity. It's both physical and digital. It's protecting your people, your systems, and your information. Obviously, CMMC and DFARS is around information, but as business owners and as leaders of organizations, we're supposed to be empowered to protect our people and the systems that empower them to help our business grow. And cybersecurity is all about protecting both those from a digital and a physical aspect. What level of cybersecurity do you feel you are? So this is a 1 to 3. I want you to put in the comments where you feel you are. 1, no idea what cybersecurity is, never thought about it before. 2, you know that there's risks out there and you're doing everything you can to try to protect yourself, your business, your family from these risks. But maybe you're not an expert in cybersecurity. I know there may be some experts on listening in, so definitely put a 3 in the comments if that's you. We'd love to hear where you're at on this scale. Are you a 1? Are you a 2? Are you a 3? I know when I had my cyber attack and when I was just getting into the defense contracting space, I was honestly a 1 because I didn't know, outside of the problem I was solving for businesses, I didn't know the risks. I didn't know what cybersecurity meant to that mission, to that problem that I was going out and solving. So we'd love to hear from you on a scale of 1 to 3, where you feel you're at in your understanding of cybersecurity. And there's nothing wrong with being a 1. I was once there. I serve business owners that are still at that 1, but we try to get them along the maturity journey to at least a 2, and then not necessarily they're going to become an expert, but it's going to become a part of their thought process and mindset. One of the things that I talk about in my new book, Cybersecurity for Everyday People, is we all need a cybersecurity standard. When we have standards in our lives, we think about those standards as we navigate the world. And that's really that expert level that we want to get more people to from a mindset standpoint. That's going to help us all be more secure, more protected, and safer as we navigate our day-to-day. So what are the stakes of CMMC compliance? I want to take a quick step back and clarify what CMMC is if you have not heard of it. So CMMC, as mentioned, is the biggest cybersecurity effort in U.S. history. It's called the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. It's a certification type model. There's a certifying body called the accreditation body, and they have set a security standard for anybody doing business with the U.S. government. Why did they do this? Because they did many studies. The biggest research firms did a number of studies to say, why is our information getting out to our adversaries from a U.S. defense standpoint? And they estimated about 1.1 billion which is just a big number to say most or a lot of our information that we deem as top secret or should be secret to the United States is being leaked into the wrong hands. And why is that taking place? And they determined it's through the defense contractors, through those third parties, through those contractors that serve into the US government. They're prime targets. They're not as potentially secure as the US government. So why wouldn't our adversaries go after them first in order to get in our front door? Because those people have the access and the information, the proprietary information that they need to get a leg up from a defense standpoint. So they created the CMMC framework, which is based off of the NIST 800-171, which is just a organization that creates security standards for a variety of industries, this being the most comprehensive and wide-ranging. Most people that do business with the US government, either now or in the future, are going to have to align with the CMMC framework. The Department of Defense is the first agency that has said we are going to be the leader in this because defense is of utmost importance to the US mission. And they're making it a mandatory requirement for any DoD, Department of Defense contractor to align with these requirements. And for a lot of organizations, it is a steep feat. There's a lot that needs to be put in place. There's about 110 different objectives, controls. There's 310 objectives in those 110 controls. I look at it, a control is really an item that you need to address. And then there's obviously objectives under those different controls that help you to address those specific tasks or items. What is this going to do? CMMC helps ensure that companies have appropriate cybersecurity measures in place to protect the sensitive data that's sent back and forth. I've had many clients that have been restricted to access critical information they need on contracts because they can't prove that they have these measures in place. It becomes business critical and they start losing money from it. And that's when most people start to take it serious. But we want to make sure through trainings like this that you can start the engine, you can start toward the right direction so that that doesn't happen to you where somebody starts to threaten the money that you're depending on to pay payroll, to keep your business rolling and to pay necessary bills to keep the lights on. What does non-compliance result in? I think this is something that feels like it may be fear-mongering. That's one of the things I will never do in this business is fear-monger someone. It's really just education. We've seen probably 10 to 15 companies actually get the non-compliance repercussions. That could be losing a contract that they're resubmitting for. That could be trying to get a new contract that they thought they were going to win, but the competition, the competitor already had this stuff in place and they lost it. And the contracting officer told them that that may be a reason for it. There are many fines that come along with this. We've seen whistleblower fines where somebody tells on their previous employer that they said they were doing these types of activities, but they really weren't. Lawsuits, we've seen a number of companies sued because they weren't doing what they were supposed to do and what they signed off on contracts to say, we have DFARS 7012 or we have CMMC in place. But then when a data breach came or when a cyber incident happened, the investigators realized that they weren't even close to that level of compliance. And that's what a lot of companies are doing. They're signing the dotted line to say, yes, we're doing this, knowing that they're not. And that's a false claim. Obviously, that's not ethical from really a reputation standpoint. But we see a lot of companies do it, and that it really comes back to bite them through lawsuits. And not every company gets caught, but it'll really compromise your business if you don't do things ethically and in the right manner. And it doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg to get this accomplished. It just takes a targeted plan and the time and the space to think through it. And that's why we're putting on this type of training to help you walk the dog, walk your mind through this scenario to help you have a better chance here. So what are the current requirements? A lot of people start with what are our actual requirements? There's a lot of confusion, a lot of misunderstandings when it comes to this topic. So most of you are probably familiar with DFARS, and these are the actual DFAR lines, but let's reference them as the 7012, 7019, 7020. You have 7012, which has been around since 2017. About 2019, 7019 came into play, coincidentally 2019 and 7019, but That was about the year that came into play. And then just this past year, as CMMC was formalizing, they put in 70/20, which eventually will help encompass all of those different requirements to be. You have to have NIST 800-171 in place. You have to report incidents within 72 hours. There's obviously the flow down. So if you're a prime contractor, you have to flow down these requirements to your subcontractor. That's what supply chain security is all about. Submitting your SPUR score, your supplier performance risk system score. That's something you should have already done in PIEE. If you haven't done that, I definitely recommend you do that. And if you need help with that, you can definitely reach out and we'll make sure to send you our guide to do that. That's where the government is going to go when you put in a bid for a proposal or you come up for a renewal on a contract. They're going to go into PIEE, which is the procurement database, and they're going to search if your SPUR score is in there and what is that SPUR score. And they're starting to use this to make decisions. So if yours isn't in there or you have a negative number, they may not issue you the contract, even though your proposal beats the other one. So that's a critical step that I recommend everybody do. And then 70/20 is all about having the right plans and procedures, the system security plan, making sure you meet those requirements and then can be eventually assessed or audited to those requirements. And that's coming up really, really, really soon. Everybody's asking, where do I go for my C3 PAO? Where do I go to schedule my audit? But most of these companies still aren't even ready for the audit. They're prematurely and acting out of fear and really because they're shook that they may be audited. So they're now starting to want to rush to the audit, which is going to cost them extra money. It's also going to, if they fail the audit, put them in a bad light. So we recommend people kind of taking a step back. No one needs to get an audit immediately. Obviously, you want to get it on the schedule. You want to have a plan in place to march towards that, but you don't need to go and get an audit immediately. I don't care what anybody tells you. There may be companies out there that have been requested to do a C3 PAO audit through a certified third-party assessment organization. But most organizations do not have to do an audit. So don't be pressured into doing that immediately. Make sure you're ready. Make sure you've walked through and done a mock assessment to what that auditor is going to look at, and that you have the time and space to implement any gaps that come up. That's going to save you a lot of time and money when that audit does come around. So implementation gone wrong. This is what this session is all about. Up to this point, it's been a lot of background, some of the requirements. So what are the biggest things that we see companies going wrong when it comes to an implementation? Most of the time, I would say 50% of the time we have companies come to us after they've been already asked, you should have submitted your SPUR score, you should have been compliant, 12 months ago because the requirement was in your contracts and you were signing off, and then they want to get started. And what that does is that it causes IT providers, companies like us that help you get ready. It causes contracting officers to start putting pressure on you, and those costs are significantly increased because the timeline has to be shrunk. Maybe it's a month versus that 6 to 8 months. So that's kind of the emergency fee that we talk about a lot. Is if you're going to companies and you're saying we need this yesterday, the cost is going to go way up. So starting too late is a huge implementation gone wrong. We recommend companies just start to have the conversation internally or with an external advisor service provider early on, so that you don't feel rushed, you don't get expensive fixes or fines, you don't miss any deadlines or lose contracts. We've seen, as I mentioned, 10 to 15 companies, after the fact, after they've lost a $2 million, $5 million, $10 million contract, then they want to take this stuff serious. And it's really too late at that point. From my perspective as a business owner, you got to get out in front of this stuff. The warning signs, this has been out for a number of years, since 2017, got serious in 2019, and it got even more serious and an actual auditable requirement in 2024. So you've had plenty of time. Not to say it's too late, but you got to get started very soon if you haven't already. Inexperienced or misaligned IT providers. One of the biggest things we hear each and every day is our IT provider has us taken care of. They said we were CMMC compliant. Sure, there are some IT providers that have this under control, but many times the IT provider is only doing the 50% of the requirements, which is technical. They're making sure your email is good, making sure you're monitored, making sure your laptops are set up properly. But these requirements are 50% technical and about 50% administrative and documentation. And most times, IT providers do not do the appropriate documentation, the scoping, the information scoping to make sure you understand what your full environment is, not just the environment that they have their arms around, but what about your physical environment? What about the people you employ? Where is your data being shipped to? Is it in the US, outside the US? These are all things you need to accomplish through documentation and through the administrative pieces of these requirements. So make sure you have an experienced IT provider and that you're asking them the right questions. Are you helping us with documentation? Are you ready for us to be audited and for you to be audited as a part of our audit? Because they are the biggest external service provider that's going to be in scope if they are processing or storing CUI, controlled unclassified information, which many of you may have heard about. And that's what CMMC is all about. I don't want to get too deep into the technicalities, but if you have contracts that have those requirements that we went through before in them from a DFARS perspective, you have these requirements, and so does your IT provider, unless they've found ways around it to not process or store any of that critical information from the government's perspective. Insufficient resources for implementation. So what most companies do is they put one person internally responsible for CMMC. Ultimately, the executive board, the CEO, who's ever running the company is responsible for this. And they need to put qualified individuals on this, not an intern or somebody who may not have the experience from both understanding the legal, the governance, the administrative, the technical. You have to have people in these different areas to really address this. And it creates a lot of financial strain because they're just throwing one resource at doing this full implementation. And it makes it extremely difficult to make progress on an ongoing basis. Compliance is not just a check the box one time and then it's completed. It takes time to work through this. It takes the appropriate resources, the appropriate experts. And as we know, just like you know from serving the government, if they hire somebody inexperienced, the project's probably going to derail. I'm not saying you need an external company to come in, but you can bring an individual from your team that really understands this stuff or can get up to speed on it and kind of expedite the process a little bit, make sure you don't have any extreme financial strain that comes up. Maintaining ongoing compliance. I think that's one of the biggest things that a company like Valor offers is we help companies maintain ongoing compliance, updating documentation as the business changes, as they change systems and applications, making sure that the documents that are going to be audited against are all up to date. That's what most companies fall behind in, is keeping things up to date, which really ultimately risks contract eligibility, because what companies say is once an assessment comes around, oh, we completed our NIST 171 in 2022, and nothing's been updated since. And they see that as a huge gap because they know your business has changed over the past 3 years. So keeping things up to date is huge. Starting too late, misaligned IT and external service providers, and then insufficient resources. You have to understand the resources you have in order to accomplish this big objective. So what should you do next? These are some of the things that have gone right in the organizations we've worked with. Making sure you have the appropriate scope. This is where it all starts. What is in scope and what's out of scope? That's one of the things that we do from day one. As we talk to the executive board, we talk to the people involved with government contracts. Why does scoping really matter? Because it ensures you focus, as I mentioned, those resources on the most critical areas, on the most critical applications. Most of the time it's email, some type of ERP, maybe it's some type of contract management system, could be a CAD, a drawing type software. You have to understand what's in scope so that you can start protecting it in the right way up to these standards. And that's really where everything starts. Assess gaps and plan. Most companies go from scope to just immediately starting to implement. And you have to assess what are the most critical gaps and what's the biggest bang for each dollar that you spend. You have to have a plan in place, put a budget in place as a part of this plan. I'd say 90% of companies don't have a budget when it comes to these requirements. They just start spending based off of what somebody tells them they should spend money on, or they buy some type of software that says, go buy this vulnerability assessment tool, or go buy these types of laptops. And that's really just throwing darts blindly with your eyes closed. And I feel like you need a clear plan that makes sense for you so that you can ultimately save time and make sure that every dollar and every person and hour that you spend on this is very targeted to really help you get where you need to go. Implement and train. So, really one of the things we see after the plan's in place is they start to implement. They have a clear plan. Maybe it's a 12 to 24 month plan, but they have a plan in place. They start to implement both the technical and the human readiness. This is not just technical. As I mentioned, it's about 50% technical requirements and 50% administrative documentation and training. So you're going to want to make sure when you implement, you train at the same time so that your people know what's being put in place and that you control that cultural shift that's happening as your information, as your organization is getting more and more secure. Audit and monitor. So as I mentioned, you don't need to go get an external audit for the most part at this time. That will come, and maybe it's on your desk already if you're one of those few contractors that have that requirement currently. But you have to keep this stuff up to date. In order to keep something up to date, you have to monitor it. Most people say if you don't measure something, you can't manage it. So you have to find a way to measure this to say every 3 months, we're going to look at, has our business changed, and do we need to update our CMMC compliance structures, our documentation, our people, the training we put out. You have to continue to monitor this. We help companies each and every day. If you join or you download our ebook, we'll make sure you get on our email list to keep you updated on everything going on in the CMMC ecosystem. That's kind of a freebie we give out to the world just to make sure everybody knows what they need to do. And that's really the first step, is the awareness piece. And then you can start taking that targeted action. So that concludes today's session. I'm going to take a few questions either from LinkedIn or from YouTube just to see what everybody's curious about. If you haven't downloaded our free ebook or that pre-session questionnaire up to this point, you can go ahead and get the ebook from the QR code in the middle. That's really our gift to you for tuning into this session. We believe it's so important to just lean in and get the information you need. Hopefully you found a lot of benefit from this, no matter what angle you're coming at this from. We'd love to hear from you. You can email us here. We also recently just put out a book, Cybersecurity for Everyday People. So if you're one of those people who are kind of a 1 or a 2, and you feel like you have a lot to learn from a cybersecurity perspective, I recently put out a book that breaks down a lot of the stories that I've been through over the past 8 years, talks a little bit about my cyber attack, how I learned about cybersecurity, and how I've helped many people. The person I talk about in the book, her name is Beth, and we walked her from not understanding cybersecurity at all to being a security champion in her community and able to secure her business. And we talk about exactly how she protected her business so you can do the same in your life. But if you're a defense contractor and you know cybersecurity, we'd love for you to download our free ebook as a thank you for joining this session. And that's kind of our giveaway for taking some time to join us here. So let's look at the comments to see if there are any questions. Perfect. So we had one person ask, this is a common question, how much does it typically cost to get CMMC compliant? This is such a big question. We typically see companies spend about $25,000 and $75,000. I know that's a wide range. We've had companies that have spent about $25,000, $35,000 because they've been very targeted and started the process the right way to get all of the 110 controls in place, get all the way up to speed, and then be able to keep themselves at 110. Really, requires them to obviously have that continuous monitoring. But I'd say anywhere between 25 and 75 for readiness and implementation. I know that sounds like a lot, but most companies that are getting these requirements in their contracts are making well over that. So this can be a part of that cost plus contract. If it's fixed fee, try to bake this into your contract. We try to give companies a lot of strategies to put this into their rate card, to put it into some of the costs they're billing to the government, because the government really values this if you have it implemented. They know how important it is to protect information, and they'll actually give you some credit when it comes to those types of objectives. So I'd definitely encourage you to think through how you can bill back your readiness costs. When it comes to the audit, this is one of the biggest questions we get each and every day. We're getting see-through PAOs that are saying it's going to be between 40 and 70 grand just to get the audit. They're called an assessment. These assessors are going out and doing an audit. An audit is where you look at requirements and see what's in place, what's not in place, and then tell you what's not in place, and you either pass or fail. That's an audit to me. They're called an assessment, which is just kind of a different way of saying audit. But there's readiness, which is the implementation, the gap assessment stage, and then there's the actual audit. So when it comes to the audit, if you're fully ready to go and you want an audit, you have to talk to multiple C-through PAOs. You can't just go to the first one and they want to spend, they want you to spend 70 grand on an audit to bring their whole team in to audit you. You want to go ahead and talk to a couple of them. I can't give you an exact price because we're not a see-through PAO, we're not an auditor. We simply help companies get ready, budget, plan, put the right things in place. So when the audit comes, we want to make sure you're ready, confident, and there's no uncertainty that you're going to pass that audit. So those are kind of the cost breakdowns. You have about, I'd say for the common firm, maybe you're 50 to 100 people. You go ahead and spend about 40, 50 grand on readiness. And then the audit should be under that. It should be, I'd say between 20 and 30 grand. When all is said and done, the see-through PAO and the audit marketplace, it's not going to be, at tip top that it's at now. A lot of the see-through PAOs are saying, we're going to charge 70 grand. And that's not going to be possible because these companies under 100, they're not going to be able to spend that money unless the government is giving it back to them in some way through reimbursable costs or write-offs, things of that nature. So I would expect, just under 100 grand from a full cycle in this. There are strategies and ways that we put in our ebook that you can actually minimize some of those costs and get creative, but it's different things for different businesses. So you have to consult with the right people, ask the right questions. Questions are the best answers. I love to say that because I believe it's so important to ask questions before you just go ahead and implement. Make sure you get multiple opinions, whether it's for readiness or it's for the audit. You shouldn't go with the first person because there's a lot of differing information out there. That's what's creating a lot of the confusion in this ecosystem. We're very focused on just translating this information. You have our contact information here if you want to ask us any questions. We love to do this. As I mentioned early on, the defense industrial base, the military, it runs deep in my veins. I've been in it for a long time now, which sounds crazy to think about, but it's something that I know what they're going through. I know what you potentially are going through if you're a defense contractor. We want to be of most help and most service to you. You serve the warfighter, you serve the people that really help our country be more safe, more secure, more protected. And we want to make sure that you keep doing that in the way you know how to do best. And that's why we exist here at Valor Cybersecurity. Would love to be a resource to you. Please go ahead and download our free ebook. That's our gift for joining today. And if you have any questions, as mentioned, reach out. My name is Greg Tomczyk. Until next time, stay safe, stay secure.